Bonjour. In this part of the video, I'm going to look at sports. In part one, we looked at seasons and weather, and we're going to look at sports and then how we can bring all of that together. So let's have a look at the vocabulary. The nice thing about sports is a lot of the words are cognates. In other words, they're very similar to English. So that's my first question here. What do you notice about the following sports? And that's maybe what I would start off with a class and see how many they could actually work out for themselves. Also, it does mean that the vocabulary is easier and you could introduce it lower down the school because a lot of them they can just guess. Obviously, there's a lot more sports, but this is just an introduction and these maybe are the first ones to introduce. But for your learners, you might want other vocabulary depending on their interests and what is relevant for your context. But let's have a look at the pronunciation. Les sports. So it's important to point out that even though the word looks and sounds like English, it is different and it has its own pronunciation. So it's not sports, les sports. So I always say to children, try and put on a French accent. We don't say that last T, and hopefully you can remember why. Because it hasn't got that magic E after it to make us pronounce it. So the last consonant there is silent. Le tennis. Here we do hear the S. It's just an exception. Le football. And the same with football. Because these words are taken from the English, we actually say them with a slight English accent. And that's why we say some of these letters, which often we wouldn't in French. Le judo, le vélo, la gymnastique, la danse, and la natation. So another good thing that we can look at here is in terms of some grammar. We've got the article, the definite article, the word for the. And there are three different words here. See if you can work out what those three different words are. With children, you might support them with a clue, like the article comes before the word for the sport. So what do these word phrases start with? That's it. We've got les, le, and la. Any ideas why we've got three different words? And you might prompt them by suggesting, well, think about the words we've learned already, and we've learned un and une. So why are some words un and some words une? Can anybody remember? Good, we've got masculine and feminine. So le is our masculine and la is our feminine. So what does that mean that les is? It ends with an S. When do we use an S in English? For plurals. So it's plural when you've got more than one. And we can see that the word for sports ends with an S. So that's the big clue. So that's the sort of conversation I would be having with my primary pupils, introducing them gently to these concepts and really getting them to ask the questions and answer them, getting them to be language detectives and be curious. In terms of why we have masculine and feminine, children always ask that. It's a Romance language. It comes from its roots. There are no often rhyme or reason as to why some are masculine and some are feminine. Why is a table, la table, feminine? Why is swimming, la natation, feminine? So there are some patterns. So words ending in ion, like natation, are all feminine. Words that look and sound like the English, tennis, football, judo, are all masculine. And that's generally a pattern. But generally, we just have to learn them. So it's really important that every time you introduce a word, you introduce it with le or la, or un or une, and you might like to color code it. So I often do blue for masculine, red for feminine, green for plural. But you could choose whatever color you would like. And I often encourage children, when they're noting them, to note them down in two different colors or in two different areas. So you've got all your masculine words together or your feminine words together. Okay. As children go up to school, I think it's really good to try and introduce them the words to the children as you're saying them. So le tennis, So having a flashcard with a picture and a word is really good, whether that's a handmade one, as it were, or whether it's one that's online. Le judo, le football, etc., etc. Now, sports is a nice activity to introduce some use of the dictionary, a bilingual dictionary, whether that's a physical paper copy or an online one like Collins, and getting children to look words up, because often they're quite straightforward, and they're looking for a word which is a noun, often with a n for noun, and they would be trying to identify it's masculine or feminine, and often the dictionaries will say masque or femme. They might say un or une or le or la, but it's more likely that they'll say masque or femme. So then you can build some work on it. Oh, it's a masculine word. Skiing is ski. That's the noun. And we hear it, see it's masculine. So what's that? Le ski. So you can challenge your learners to see if they can look up 2 or 3 words and make a note of them and make their own visual dictionary or word mat of the sports that they like or that they do. And here we're focusing on the nouns, okay? There are different ways of saying I play tennis, for instance, but here we're just going to look at the nouns. You can also encourage learners, and you can also introduce the vocabulary with little video clips, and I put an example here that you can have a look at. But French with Alexa, French with Mr. Innes, French Easy, this is Learnesty, they all have little video clips introducing the words. So there's tons online. So, different games that we can play. Okay, so let's have a look at this, some activities. Sound files are here for you to have a look at when you look at the PowerPoint. Okay, so mini cards. So you might introduce the words by little cards that you either create or that the children create themselves and get them to see how many words that they can guess, focusing on cognates. One person can say it and the other person can try and find it. So chercher or trouver, or toucher. So chercher to look for, trouver to find, and toucher to touch. So it's almost like they can see if they can be the first to touch it or to find it. Right hand, left hand. So you can make your right hand your masculine side, your left hand your feminine side, for instance. You can say a word and the children have to put up the right hand. So I might say le tennis, le tennis. So le tennis is masculine, it's a le word. So my right hand was my masculine, okay? So all the children will be doing is put their hands up like this, as you call them. So you can say it in French, tennis, le tennis, or you can say in English, tennis, depending on what you want to work on. Again, always try and provide some support with the words on the wall or flashcard reminders of the key vocabulary. What's in the bag? So this is a nice one. So you can have a bag filled with props or the flashcards. Children have to try to guess and then they can also choose. So 2 different ways of playing it. So you might have to guess what's in the bag. So I might have a bag filled with things. Here I've got one in front of me. Okay, so you maybe will guess, so shout something out. No, le tennis, no. Le vélo, no. Le football, oui, le football. And I've got props. So this is another way of introducing vocabulary, is you can have items to introduce them, whether it be a swimsuit or a tennis racket, a helmet for cycling, you know, so clothing or accessories that might use for the sports. And you can also obviously do it with a mime as well. So like we did with weather, cold, okay, il fait froid. Here we might have tennis, the tennis. And children can do that in pairs. Okay, you can also have your bag in the middle, make a circle around the outside, play some music, a sports song, for instance, and the children, when the music stops, the teacher chooses somebody to go into the middle, and they have to choose something from the bag, and they have to mime themselves doing it, and the other children have to guess what it is. So I might I might have this, for instance. Okay, so my gymnastics ribbon. So I might use that, and the children will say la gymnastique. Now you can work on individual words, la gymnastique, but you can also build it up and use c'est, it is. C'est la gymnastique. C'est. C'est quel sport? C'est quel sport? What sport is it? C'est quel sport? C'est le football. C'est la gymnastique. Bingo. Children can draw bingo, or you can create bingo for them with images. There's 3, for instance, so here's 4. Okay. And they can draw it on little whiteboards themselves, and they can make it harder by writing the words in French as well. So flashcard auction. So if we've got flashcards, on the back of them, we can write numbers. Okay. So here we've got 20. So you'd stick the flashcards on the wall that way round, and children will take it in turns to say the number, 20, turn it over, and they have to try to say that in French. La natation is swimming, okay? So they are saying it aloud correctly and translating it. If you don't have the words, obviously, then they can just say what it is in French. It depends on how hard you want to make it. If they say it correctly, they win those 20 points. So they can work in 2 groups. Whoever gets the most number of points wins. Okay, likes and dislikes. So if we're taking it a little bit further, we've seen the c'est le football, but we maybe like to link it up with likes and dislikes. So children hopefully would already have learnt these phrases. So j'aime, I like to introduce them with a tick and a cross or a heart and a cross through a heart. So j'aime, I like, j'aime. And je n'aime pas, je n'aime pas. So you might literally just have 2 corners, put them up on your walls, okay, 2 different walls. The teacher would call a phrase like le football, and the children go to the right tick or cross to show how they feel about it. Tu aimes le football? We can then turn it into a question. Tu aimes le football? They move, tick or cross. Children who are with the tick have to say j'aime le football, and the teacher could select a student and ask that question. Tu aimes le football? Oui, j'aime le football. Tu aimes le vélo? Non, je n'aime pas le vélo. Important for the teacher to support by modelling it first of all and showing what the answer would be so the children don't feel put on the spot. You can also do that with little post-it notes, and children, if they've got little cards, can put the post-it notes together. Tu aimes la natation? Oui. Oui, simple answer, oui. Or oui, j'aime la natation. And they can mime it to show that they've understood it. Oui, j'aime la natation. So different activities that look at different skills, reading, writing, and speaking and listening there, that would be appropriate for a multi-composite class or for extension, differentiation. So taking it a wee bit further, we've looked at j'aime, je n'aime pas, I like and I don't like, but we can create a little bit more nuance there with j'adore, so maybe 2 ticks, j'adore. Je déteste, maybe 2 crosses, je déteste. So j'adore, I love, je déteste, I hate. Je préfère, I prefer, je préfère. Want to take it even further, a little bit more progression. Mon sport préféré est, mon sport préféré est, ma saison préférée est. So linking back to seasons. So my preferred or my favorite sport and season is, and then you can finish it off. So that could be turned into a nice little question and answer session with the class. Children can do it as a survey. Tu aimes le football could be the title, okay. J'aime, je n'aime pas, keeping it really simple. J'adore, je déteste. Or it could be quel est ton sport préféré? Quel est ton sport préféré? What's your favorite sport? And then that's much more open-ended. They can obviously create a tally on a little whiteboard, and then they can use that to turn that into bar graphs and write short phrases explaining their results. We can also look at taking this a next step further, and look at why we might like something. So giving further reasons for our opinions, using the phrase parce que, because, another little connector. So here we're really looking up at second level. Parce que c'est, what's it like? It is an adjective. So children can first of all start to think of those in English. So I always like to get them to think of positive and negative ones in English, like fun, boring, hard, easy, okay? Trying to think of individual words rather than a phrase. And then you can build that up with looking at a dictionary for dictionary work and getting them to look not only for nouns this time, but for adjectives, and it should say adj, okay? And then they can write those out. And here's a couple. So working with that expression, c'est, it is. So these were ones that came up with a training session. So you can see some of them are individual words like fun and boring, but some of them are phrases. So in English, healthy in French is a whole phrase. Now a dictionary may well have that, but it might not, okay? I am talented, again, there's a whole phrase there. And that makes it very hard for children to look that up, because they might look up I am and talented, and that's tricky. So if you want to make it easier, instead of making it an open task, you might give them the individual words in English to find in the dictionary. 2 positives, 2 negatives, for instance, okay? Or you might give them all the words in French and in English and get them to match up by using a dictionary. Again, it depends on how much support you want to give them. But then they can put a nice sentence together. For instance, tu aimes le football? Tu aimes le football? Oui, j'aime le football. C'est amusant. C'est amusant. We can choose one of these words. And again, they could have little keywords to help them. So fun, and they could write fun as a post-it, and then they could add that so that this activity is all done with post-its or little prompts for speaking or also for writing. And you could challenge them to see who could write the longest sentence, for instance. Okay, so as a plenary, okay, consolidate what we've done. Let's see if you can make up a sentence about what season or sport you like and why. Whisper it to the next person. If you're on your own, just write it down, okay? And if that's too hard, then you could provide them for the class on prompt cards. So that really focuses in on listening and memory. And charades, we've already done charades with individual mimes, but now we might have a whole phrase. So if we look at our weather word, remember the sun popping out, il fait beau, and we might have natation, and we might have j'aime. So il fait beau, j'aime la natation. Now you haven't got maybe a mime for quand, but then you could say afterwards, right, well, what word is missing in there when it's nice? So again, this is one of these other little phrases. It's a time phrase. It's not a connector. This is a time phrase, when, and we can start to teach them those. So that might be another little bit of dictionary work, trying to teach them 2 or 3 little time phrases. Bien. Okay, so now your turn. So here are some questions. Qu'est-ce que tu aimes comme sport? Qu'est-ce que tu aimes? Quel est ton sport préféré? Quelle est ta saison préférée? Quel temps fait-il aujourd'hui? Hopefully you'll remember what those questions mean. So what do you like as sports? What's your favorite sport? What's your favorite season? And what's the weather like today? So have a go, maybe answering those, writing it down, drawing pictures to show me. And those are the sorts of activities that you can do with the class, okay? So as a speaking, creating a poster, writing a short phrase, perhaps for a snowball activity, or giving a little presentation of 1 phrase, two phrases, to a partner and seeing if they can work it out. Merci. Au revoir.